October 3rd, 1998. Twilight had already settled along the mountains, painting the rugged landscape in shades of deep purple dusk. The sky wove through the growing darkness, surrounded by shadowy hills that rose toward the cloudless expanse, stretching toward the first hints of starlight. Leon would have appreciated the beauty of the scenery more if he weren't running so late. He wouldn't have trouble making it to the station on time for his shift, but he had hoped to stop by his apartment first, drop off his luggage, take a shower, and grab something to eat. As things stood, he'd be lucky if he had time to pull over at a roadside diner. At least he had changed into his uniform at his last stop, saving himself a few minutes. But even so, he had seriously messed up his schedule. His shift started at 9 sharp, and it was already past 8. Leon pressed down on the accelerator a little more, though his Jeep had just passed a sign indicating he was only 30 minutes away from Raccoon City. At least the road was fairly clear. Aside from a couple of cars, he hadn't seen anyone in what felt like hours. That was a welcome change compared to the traffic jam he had endured on the outskirts of New York, which had eaten up most of his afternoon. He had even called the night before to try to leave a message for the night shift sergeant, letting them know he might be late. But there must have been an issue with the phone line, because all he got was a busy signal. The little furniture he owned had already been moved to his small studio apartment in the Trask district, a working-class but cozy neighborhood. There was a park just a couple of blocks away, and the police station was only a 5-minute drive. No more massive traffic jams. No more overcrowded slums. No more senseless acts of brutality. If he could survive the embarrassment of starting his first shift as a police officer without even having time to unpack, he was looking forward to living in a peaceful little town like Raccoon City. Despite trying to keep his excitement in check, he couldn't help but feel a slight thrill. Of course, what had happened in Raccoon City had been horrific, but the killers hadn't been caught, and the investigation had barely begun. If he managed to impress Irons as much as he had impressed his police academy instructors, he might even get the chance to work on the case. He had heard rumors that Irons was a bit of an asshole, but Leon knew his training had been top-notch, and even an asshole would have to be at least a little impressed. After all, he had graduated in the top 10 of his class, and he wasn't a complete stranger to Raccoon City. He had spent most of his summers there as a kid, while his grandparents were still alive. Back then, the police station had been a library, and Umbrella still had years to go before transforming the town into a small city. Still, for the most part, it remained the quiet place he remembered from his childhood. Once the cannibalistic killers were locked away, Raccoon City would be an ideal place again. A clean, peaceful community, nestled in the mountains like a secluded paradise. Something darted across the Jeep's path. Jesus! Leon slammed on the brakes, and the SUV swerved wildly as he snapped out of his thoughts and struggled to regain control. The tires screeched, the sound cutting through the night like a shriek. The Jeep spun until it was facing the dark trees lining the roadside and finally came to a stop on the shoulder with one last jolt. His heart was pounding, his stomach lodged in his throat. He rolled down the window and craned his neck, trying to see the animal that had darted across the road. He hadn't hit it, but it had been close. It looked like a dog, but he hadn't gotten a clear view. It was large, maybe a German shepherd or an oversized Doberman. but something about it seemed off. He had only seen it for a fraction of a second, just a blur of red eyes and a lean, agile body that reminded him of a wolf. But there was something more, something that made it look sweaty? No, that was just a trick of the light. Or maybe I was so freaked out I imagined it. You're fine, and you didn't hit it. That's what matters. Jesus, he muttered again, this time softer, feeling both relieved and annoyed as the adrenaline started to fade. People who let their dogs roam free were idiots. They preached about wanting their pets to be free, then acted shocked when they got run over. The Jeep had stopped just a few meters from a road sign that read, Raccoon City 10. He could make out the letters in the dim twilight. Leon glanced at his watch. He still had a little over half an hour before reaching the station. He had time, yet for some strange reason, he remained sitting there, breathing deeply, with his eyes closed. A gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine cooled his face. The empty stretch of road felt calm, but unnaturally so, as if the whole landscape were holding its breath, waiting. When his heartbeat finally returned to normal, he was surprised to find he still felt uneasy, even slightly anxious. The Raccoon City murders. Didn't some of the victims die from animal attacks? Wild dogs or something? Maybe that wasn't a pet after all. It was a disturbing thought, one that only grew worse when he suddenly had the feeling that the dog was still nearby, watching him from the shadows of the trees. Welcome to Raccoon City, Officer Kennedy. Watch out for the things that might be watching you. Don't be an idiot, he muttered to himself, feeling slightly better when he heard the adult, no-nonsense tone in his voice. He often wondered if he'd ever outgrow his overactive imagination. You daydream about catching bad guys, and then you go making up monster dogs lurking in the woods. Come on, Leon. Try acting your age, okay? You're a cop, a grown man. He restarted the engine and pulled back onto the road, ignoring the lingering unease that had taken hold of him, despite his rational reassurances. He had a new job, a nice apartment in a thriving town. He was competent, intelligent, and reasonably attractive. So long as he kept his imagination in check, everything would be fine. And I'm already on my way, he told himself, forcing a smile that felt out of place but suddenly necessary. He was on his way to Raccoon City, to a promising new life. There was nothing to worry about, nothing at all. Claire was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and the fact that her backside had been sore for the past couple of hours wasn't helping. The rumble of her Harley-Davidson's engine had settled into her bones, a physical counterpoint to the butterflies in her stomach. And of course, the worst part was the dull, aching pain in her overheated rear. To make matters worse, it was getting dark, and like the complete idiot she was, she hadn't worn her leather riding gear. Chris was going to flip out. He's going to yell at me until his veins pop out of his neck. But I don't care. Please, God, let him be there to yell at me for being an idiot. Her Harley continued to roar down the darkened road, the sound of the engine echoing back at her after bouncing off the tree-covered hills.